Virginia and Florida in the Orange Bowl. So two-sided question here, Jackie, in regards to the season wrap-up, the big win against Florida State, another dominant performance against its rival. Some people have commented to me from the Florida fan base that, hey, this was a carbon copy of 2018. We didn't hit our goals. We didn't win the East. It's pretty much the same season. We're a top 10 team. Great, but we didn't get over that hump. Others recognize, okay, we added a win. There weren't the disappointing efforts against the likes of a Missouri or Kentucky. They didn't let down in those games. They cleaned off everybody they could. Look at the losses. Georgia by 1 score, going to LSU, leading in the second half. I think on the field, if you really break down past the record just being a 1-game improvement, you saw substantial improvement. So your thoughts about the 2018 versus 2019 progress?
I agree with you. This is a team that showed tremendous progress, not just physically, but mentally. You touched on it. They didn't have those letdown games. You know, a game at Missouri might have been a different story maybe a couple years ago, or even the game at South Carolina when things were just going wrong for them in the first half. That could have been a different story just 2 years ago, and maybe even last year before, ironically, that South Carolina game where everything kind of turned around for this program. So mentally, I think this team is able to shrug off when things go wrong a little bit better than, you know, a team maybe 3-4 years ago. So I think they made huge strides in that. And then just like I said a few minutes ago, Dan Mullen and his staff are dealing with issues with injuries. Jonathan Grenard was hurt for a couple of those big games. He didn't play against LSU. He was hurt against Georgia. Jabari Zuniga, one of their best pass rushers alongside Grenard, also missed a couple of those big games. I know if the game played against LSU maybe this next week or so, when those two are healthy, you can maybe say maybe Joe Burrow would have been pressured a little bit more. Although LSU is just such a strong team, I wouldn't pick Florida to win, but it might have been a tighter competition. And even though it was a pretty good competition, you know, compared to how Georgia and LSU played against each other in SEC championship, you can say Florida handled LSU's offense a little bit better and were able to go toe-to-toe with them offensively. So I think Florida has done really well despite all the adversities they've dealt with. They had their starting quarterback injured against Kentucky early on in the season. And to have a quarterback step in under center who has not played a game as a starter since his freshman year of high school and take this team to a New York Six Bowl says a lot about not only Kyle Trask's physicality and mental strength, but also Dan Mullen and Brian Johnson's coaching. So this team has certainly made a lot of strides. And I think a lot of people really need to kind of look at this team a little closer and say, wow, we had true freshmen playing. You know, true freshmen like Mohamoud Diabate, who came in and showed that he is a really good future on the defensive front for Florida. Freshmen like Kaiir Elam at corner, who's now named in the All-SEC freshman team by coaches this last few days. These are guys that are the future for Florida. And these are the freshmen that have already, you know, had a lot of playing time for the Gators this year. And that's where this team is showing that, you know, for the future is really, really good for them. And to have 2 back-to-back New York Six appearances for this team and this staff does wonders for them when they're on the recruiting trail. Because honestly, a lot of parents have told me, especially, you know, in the last year, that, you know, although they won last year, they wanted consistency. They didn't want to, you know, just jump on the train and believe all the hype among this team. They needed to show that this is a consistent team because, to be fair, Florida has been in a seesaw. They've been going up and down, and they haven't had that consistent success. So they wanted to see back-to-back successes from the staff, and that's what they're showing parents now. They're showing, listen, we are able to develop talent. You're seeing Kyle Trask. You're seeing Ethan White. You're seeing Mahmoud Diabate. You're seeing Kaiir Elam. Their recruiting pitch, you get to see every Saturday. And that's why sometimes you see this delayed reaction into how they're closing, because now they are not just speaking to them. They're not just saying, listen, this is what we're going to do. No, they're showing them, this is what we can do with you because this is what we did with him. And I think that's been a huge benefit of the last 2 years. And that's why this year is so successful on the field for them.
Christmas is coming, folks. Shop Amazon. Use the link in the description section below to help us build the channel. Virginia and Florida get it on at the Orange Bowl. We got Jackie Franchuli on the line from Gators territory to break it down. The other part of that question would be the combination of this bowl bid. It's the Orange Bowl. It's right there in the New Year's Six where everyone wants to be. They can't make the playoff. But at the same time, Virginia doesn't bring a whole lot of cachet, brand name, And on top of that, coming from the ACC, losing an ACC title game by 45 points, losing a fourth game of the season, barely in the top 25, not necessarily a typical New Year's Six opponent from a Power Five conference. How are Gator fans reacting to the matchup?
Well, Gator fans aren't too thrilled. I'm not gonna lie to you. I have a lot of Gator fans. They're like they wish they had a better opponent, but honestly, it was predictable. We kind of figured Virginia was going to be in that matchup just because of the way the ACC played this year, and Clemson was going to be in the playoffs, and Virginia was the automatic bid in that position. But you have to look at the location of the game. You're playing in South Florida, a prime recruiting area for the Gators. This is an excellent opportunity for Dan Mullen to show kids in their backyard, hey, if you are a Gator, you're going to be playing possibly in South Florida in front of your friends and family. And a lot of these players are from South Florida. Players like Trevon Grimes are going to be able to play at home in front of a home crowd. And that does wonders for this. A lot of people don't realize having a game like that in national spotlight does wonders for your recruiting. And just playing in South Florida, again, does wonders for them. Honestly, last week when they were trying to get all these in-home visits, guess what he did? He had a press conference on Wednesday. He was in South Florida on Tuesday night for an in-home visit. He visited a lot of schools on Wednesday, and then he was in an in-home visit that Wednesday night as well. So Dan Mullen is taking this opportunity and checking out all those targets that he needs in that very prime recruiting area. And yes, I understand Virginia is not the opponent you might have wanted. You can argue that you would probably prefer the Sugar Bowl. And yes, that would have been fantastic football. But at the same time, you got to look at the bigger picture, and recruiting is going to be, that will help recruiting, which will help Florida set up a good future. And honestly, Mark, I told you, I covered UVA before I went to Florida, before I covered to Florida. And you have to applaud what Bronco Mendenhall has done with that program, with the talent that he's been able to get. We always, fans always complain that Florida doesn't get a top 10 class consistently. Bronco Mendenhall's average class is only in the top 50. I think the last class last year was in number 37 in the country. So imagine he's been able to win the ACC Coastal with not 5 stars, not 4 stars, maybe a few 3 stars, and a lot of unranked players and 2 stars. That's great work for a program that was dead in the water for a couple of years ago. They had 3 losing seasons in a row. In Bronco Mendenhall's first season, he's only won 2 games. He did a great job of turning that program around. And I understand that people don't want Virginia in the New York Six Bowl, but I'm kind of in a feeling where, reward these guys. They've done a great job buying into what Bronco Mendenhall has done. And you know what? It'll be nice to see them, that program kind of awaken a little bit, give something else to the ACC Coastal, because Mark, ACC Coastal, I covered them for a few years, and they need something to kind of get people excited in the ACC again. I know Virginia doesn't really have the biggest fan base, but they're a loud fan base. We saw that when they won the basketball national championship this past year. They're a loud and very proud fan base, so it will be interesting to see them in South Florida.
Yeah, the ACC is unlike any other conference in America right now. Such the divide between Clemson and everyone else, and the ACC Coastal Division winners become the sacrificial lamb, and it doesn't help that it's probably the worst division in college football, but somebody's got to win it. Virginia took its turn because there had been 7 consecutive and now 7 consecutive different champions of the Coastal. So they've completely shared the division championships amongst the entire division over the past 7 years. And you make some great points about Bronco Mendenhall, just the job that he has done. And he's just starting to get some national recognition for the job that he's done. And it was a curious hire, I'll call it that, just because of his roots being in the western half of the United States, coming to a school that didn't seem to be the fit based on what he had experienced at BYU and elsewhere, and what a job that he has done and really shown what he's capable of in turning around a program 2 wins to 6 to 8 to a Coastal Division championship right now with a chance to get to 10 wins. We got Jackie Franchuli on the line from Gators territory. So since you've got all that built-in research, inherent knowledge of the Virginia roster, at least from the standpoint of the upperclassmen, some of those players that stand out in regards to what you remember of them coming into the program that have developed into an ACC competitor.
Yeah, sure. Well, actually, I didn't cover Bryce Perkins' recruitment, but that's the guy that stands out to me right now. He has, I think, over 3,000 rushing yards. And he's just such a great dual threat quarterback. I think he was hurt a little bit towards the beginning of the season, which is why people didn't really see a lot of him. He still performed well, but once he started to get more healthy, that's when they really see the benefits to that Robert Renee's offense. Perkins is such a big threat for them, and honestly, Florida has struggled against dual threat quarterbacks in the past. The only thing I will say is I'm not sure if obviously the offense can handle a John Grenard or a Jabari Zuniga as far as pass rushers. They haven't really played a defensive line like that. So it's going to be a struggle for Virginia, but Bryce Perkins has done a great job kind of allowing this offense to be productive. I remember when I covered Mike London's tenure, and a quarterback under center to be productive was a hard thing to come by when you're in Charlottesville. This is a different thing for Virginia. Usually the defense is what carried UVA for years, and now it seems like it's the opposite side. The offense has been carrying this team. The defense has been not what you expect from Virginia. Virginia actually has had a lot of good defenders in the past. Just look at Anthony Harris, who's just currently in the Minnesota Vikings roster. He was an excellent DB and All-American just a couple years ago. So they have a history of producing some good defenders. Andrew Brown, he's currently with the Browns, very talented defensive lineman. And actually, Florida recruited him out of high school as well. Quinn Blanding, a 5-star safety. So Virginia has had history of having a good defense. But this time, the offense is what's been carrying the team most of the time. So Bryce Perkins is definitely someone to look out for. Virginia actually has 2 players that were injured against Clemson, and they're more likely will be returning to play against Florida, and that's linebacker Jordan Mack and wide receiver Joe Reed. He's also a returner. I think, when you look at it, Virginia does have some other able wide receivers, and although Joe Reed is very, very talented, and I think he will be one which will add a lot to this offense, I think the return of Jordan Mack is the one that's going to make a huge difference, because they don't have such a big depth at linebacker from what I can tell from looking at the rosters. And he's such a very talented linebacker. So I think that's the one will give them a little bit of a boost. The talent disparity between Virginia and Florida is obvious. Florida will have, a 5-star at number 2 or 4-star number 2, while, Virginia does not have that. So yes, I understand that is going to be an uphill battle for Virginia, but they do have a lot of talented playmakers, and they do play with aggressiveness that Bronco Mendenhall is known for. He's known for that aggression and that type of mentality that you have to earn everything. Something that he's built at BYU. And funny enough, Bronco Mendenhall and Dan Mullen know each other very well. When Dan Mullen was a quarterbacks coach at Utah, Bronco Mendenhall was a defensive coordinator at BYU. And the first time these two coaches met, it was a defensive struggle. Utah sneaked by. I believe it was a low-scoring game. I think it was either 3-0 or 7-0. It was a very, very low-scoring game the first time these two met. So they understand each other. They understand their philosophy. And they both were joking on Wednesday's press conference that, they needed someone in between them because of this huge rivalry between Utah and BYU. So Virginia has done really well to get this far, and they've done that with some great playmakers, some individual playmakers, and also the way Bronco Mendenhall has kind of helped this program just say, you have to earn everything. They have to earn their numbers on their back. They don't just get given their numbers every year. They have to earn it during spring and fall camp. So that change of mentality from this program, they're more accountable than I've seen them under the Mike London era. So that's their ability to kind of change that program. That's what Bronco Mendenhall has done to change that program from a 2-win, 3-win team to now approaching a possible 10-win team coming this next month.
Yeah, Jordan Mack has been one of the better defenders in the ACC for the past couple seasons, coming off a 7.5 sack season, 7.5 tackles for loss. Eli Hanback, voted by a few services the best defensive lineman in the ACC with 9.5 tackles for loss and 5.5 sacks. A couple guys to look out for on defense. You go through the Joe Reed situation there. He's been their playmaker on offense for a few seasons. He's the speedster. He's the burner. He's the possible game changer, even though the stats might belie that. At 9 yards per reception, he caught 70, and they want to get the ball in his hands. Unfortunately, he was not in the Clemson game, but should be ready to go for the Florida Gators. We got Jackie Franchuli on the line from Gators territory. Do you think the players have the incentive to go out there and give it everything they've got, considering 2-touchdown favorite? They fortunately weren't in the situation where it looked like a playoff berth or an SEC championship game was in order late in the season, so they've had time to adjust the goals and get ready for this opportunity.
Yeah, I think they do. I think they have a lot to play for. I think they're still playing for respect, honestly. When you looked at in that final college football playoff rankings, you want to question why were they at number 9? Just look at it. Like I understand why Georgia was still ahead of them just because of the head-to-head, but when you look at Georgia, honestly was blown out by LSU, and Florida was going to toe against the Tigers, and you look at Baylor's schedule and you see who Baylor played compared to Florida, and just having the 2 losses to top 5 teams
And how they played them.
And they beat Auburn, and you just think, why weren't they, let's say, ahead of Baylor? Why weren't they ahead of Wisconsin with 3 losses? So I understand the motivation there from Gators saying we need to go out there and beat Virginia like Clemson beat Virginia to show that we are good as Clemson. So I think that's something that they really want to show. This team is all about trying to earn respect. And honestly, too, this game is also an opportunity for some of these younger players to say, hey, Dan Mullen, hey, Todd Grantham, hey, John Hevesy, I want to play next year. I am fighting for a spot for next year already. This is a great opportunity for, Ethan Wright to cement his spot in the offensive line. It's an opportunity for Richard Garach to do the same. It's an opportunity for Kareem Elam, Jaden Hill, and all those corners to establish that they want to have a starting lineup. They want to be part of the starting lineup. Don't forget, CJ Henderson is not playing in the bowl game. He decided to forego his senior season and enter NFL draft. And he decided he's not playing. So that means there's one corner spot open. So those guys like Kareem Elam, Jaden Hill, and Chester Kimbrough want to take their shot and want to show Todd Grantham, hey, I want to be that next CJ Henderson. And then you have a question of Marco Wilson. We haven't heard his decision yet. Most likely that decision will come after the bowl game. And he's playing at star. Trey Dean has been playing a little bit at safety. He kind of replaced Trey Dean at star. Will they put Chester Kimbrough at star? They're trying to build depth there because they lost a lot of depth at that position with John Huggins leaving the program earlier in the spring. So early in the summer, actually. So I think this is an opportunity for those guys to demonstrate to the staff, like, hey, I want to play next year. This is my spot. I'm trying to earn it. And I think that's why there's that motivation to prove to everybody. And honestly, Dan Mullen hates to lose. He said that a couple times already this year. He's even, I think the most famous speech he did was after that Missouri loss last year. It says, if you want to thumb wrestle with me, I'm going to beat you. And that type of mentality has been instilled in this team. So that's why I don't see them, coming out, and not performing to their best. I just think a lot of these guys understand that their position is not safe. Kyle Trask knows that Emory Jones is right behind him. He wants to perform to his top ability. Emory Jones wants to perform in his top ability as well because he wants to get that starting job next year, especially with Felipe Franks leaving the program. So I don't think there's no motivation for this team. There's several things that they're fighting for come the Orange Bowl.
And I would think that they would just have to look back to 1 year stepping off the field after a dominant performance against Michigan in a New Year's Six game to say, man, that felt good. And number 2, we could reap all the benefits of the offseason talk and everything was positive. And we kept being reminded, hey, we won the Peach Bowl. We beat Michigan. We finished in the top 10 versus you lost a bowl game. You had a decent season, but you lost the bowl game. And that carries on through to spring practice and beyond. Definitely. And Gator fans, by the way, I've got you at number 6 in my rankings. So I take into consideration performance.
Yeah, that's about where I think they should be. I was really, really shocked. I actually agreed with the AP poll. I think they were number 6 in the AP poll. That just seems more reasonable to me after looking at everything. I understand Wisconsin beat a lot of ranked teams, but a lot of the teams they beat, like Minnesota, yes, they were a top 10 team when Wisconsin played them, but they dropped a lot in the last few weeks. I just don't understand some of the reasoning. It looks like the college football committee really highlighted quality wins over losses. But at the same time, you have to give the credit to Florida. They beat the teams that they had to beat. And then the only losses was to number 1 and number 5. But again, it just I understand the rationale. I just might not agree with it.
I am with you, Jackie. We appreciate you stopping by to break down recruiting, of course, and then also the Orange Bowl matchup against Virginia. Hope to see you soon. Enjoy the rest of your day.
You too, Mark. Thanks for having me.